Hey!
Hi!
How's everyone doing out there in Biscuit Imports land? Thanks for joining us today. We are three girls in a kiln. My name is Amy.
I'm Claire. I'm Debs.
And we're so excited for you to be here with us today as we show you three different glazing techniques for summer fun. We want to thank Biscuit Imports for giving us this opportunity. A little bit about us. We are three girls and a kiln. And
You're in
Grand Cayman in the Cayman Islands. We have been quarantining now for months on our little tiny island, which isn't so bad when you can go to the beach.
Exactly.
But we are finally opening our studio up to the public next week. So we're really excited. We're going to have classes and drop-ins and summer camp.
People have been signing up. We've been getting really excited.
Oh man,
It's like store dancing everywhere.
It's so exciting.
All day.
So exciting. So thank you for joining us today. Hi everybody. Hi Courtney. Hi Ashley.
So popular.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about us. We have a studio where you can come in and paint your own pottery. We do wood sign classes. We also do pin art and terrarium classes and all those things. We also have a small retail shop where we do finish wear. So we have our own patterns that we designed and market there. And so we're here today to show you some of those fun patterns that we thought would be summery for all of you in your shops.
Exactly. I think we think so, at least.
Yeah. We hope so. They're fun. They're festive.
They were fun doing them.
Yeah, we have summer all the time.
Yes. That's true.
No, I'm looking very pale right now that you say it, but we try. We do what we can.
It's the quarantine look.
Oh, it is!
Not being able to go to the beach.
The COVID complexion. Exactly. So I think next we're going to go into some basics.
Yeah. Just a refresher for some people. This could be for people who have just opened up their paint your own pottery studios or looking to open up their paint your own pottery studios. We just kind of want to go through the terms that we use so we don't have to keep repeating ourselves during the tutorial.
Because we've made up a lot of them.
Yes, that's true.
Yes, exactly. We have one of them is the very technical squeezy bottle, where people are like, is that what you really call it? And we're like, actually it is, exactly. A squeezy bottle. Nozzle sometimes doesn't look great if you have a bunch of like nozzles in your purse that fall out. I have been there before.
Instead of like quarters and stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's
try
not
to pay for them.
Yeah, it's not a good look though. People
No.
are like, "What is that?" And you just put it back in your purse as quickly as possible. That I can say I have done before. But squeezy bottle is this bad guy. We have got different nozzles too. So what are the sizes of the nozzles?
I think this
3.
import sells 3 different sizes. Small, I don't know, they're by gauges. I think it's like
Small,
20.
That's a large.
20, 18, and 16 maybe, I think. They have a
so.
really fine one, yeah.
Yeah, the little yellow nozzle, if you've had any experience with those, not fun. Not fun having to unclog those.
Yeah. Useful, but not fun.
Yeah, especially when you've got a full class of people thinking like, I want really fine letters. And then you're like, oh, please don't.
We use straight pins from sewing, especially because then they have like the tip at the end so you know it's in there. You don't try to... I mean, it's kind of fun in the middle of class, especially because people can BYOB when they forget to take the pin out and they just try to...
Oh, and they shoot across the room?
Yeah.
They become projectile, like, weapons. It's a lot of fun. Keeps it interesting. Keeps everybody on their toes. But squeezy bottles are probably #1 technical term, I might say. And then, as you know, or maybe not know, squeezy bottles you only need to do once, essentially, when you're using it on your piece. Squeezy bottle, you're going to have enough glaze that comes out, so you only need to really fill in your areas once. But a paintbrush, which is this guy. Ooh, it's like we have magic wands. Oh, hey!
There you go.
I feel so Harry Potter all of a sudden. I like it. You need to do 2 to 3 coats if you're using a paintbrush to apply color. And a good time when you're using your paintbrush to apply color would be on the inside of a vessel. For example, there's other ways. That's a vessel. Oh, I thought I was going the wrong way. It's very confusing. That's a vessel. And there's different ways you can go about putting color into the inside of your piece. And a lot of times it'll be like, here's your color in a palette right there. I feel like we're on a cooking show. It's all just here, ready for us. You can put color in a palette and then scoop and put into your piece. And that's how you're going to get that 2 to 3 coats. Or we kind of just go a little bit old school and just take the bottle and squirt. If you wanted to know, like, I was thinking this morning a rough amount of what amount of glaze I would put into like a stemless wine glass. I was like, in my pregnancy, I've gotten quite bougie and I like to put chocolate sauce into my coffee. It's about the same amount of time. But it's about the same amount of squirt, and then you take it out, and then you swirl, 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 pull up the sides, and that's pretty much how we go about doing the insides of our
It makes it, I mean, some people will say, well, isn't that a lot of glaze? We kind of go on the conservative side, but it actually saves glaze because you're not pouring it into something and then they don't use it all. Whereas if you pour it inside of a mug or a stemless like that, they're kind of forced to use it all by going up the sides and getting a really nice thick coat by pulling it up the sides and swirling it around.
Yeah, some people that's their best coverage is the inside.
Yes.
You tell them 2 to 3 coats, they ignore you, but the inside they're forced to.
Exactly. Then when they come in, their piece is like, I didn't do 2 or 3 coats. You're like, but the inside is beautiful.
Looks great. You did a great job.
You did a good job. Exactly.
One of the reasons that we put glaze on the inside of things is to cut down sometimes on the chance of objects fissuring or what's that other word? That crazing.
Yeah.
Especially with hot objects. So we find that if you put a nice thick coat of color, even if somebody's like, I don't want color, just do white.
Just do white.
I think that helps a lot with it.
It's just white glaze. But just to be on the safe side on the inside of a piece, you still do white.
Yeah.
So their other thing will be once you've done your color on the inside of your piece, we'll a lot of the times tout, like, if you want to make your life a little bit simpler, then just go for a white rim. And basically that's just because you can neaten it up really easy. Some of these are a little more technical and didn't go white rims. I'm looking at what the ladies have done.
So the different,
I did not go that way. I went sneaky and I did
white rim?
Yes.
Colored rim.
Yes.
That's really the difference. And then with Debs's pattern, the color from the pattern from the outside flows into the inside. Yeah. And that kind of gives it a nice cohesiveness.
Oh, 3 different ways of doing a rim.
Wow,
look at us.
Fancy.
That was planned.
So planned. So planned. And if you were doing, so you have a white rim. Here we go. I really made a messy job here on purpose. So this way you can kind of see, you can use sandpaper to just clean it up. And on Amy's also, if you're doing the color first, you can always clean up the outside using a sanding block, which we have quite a lot of. My dog eats them on occasion, so they're not overly attractive.
They're so squishy.
But they work, exactly. Or you can go old school like sandpaper. And I mean, if you don't like this sound, plug your ears now. But then you're just basically kind of going over your rim, cleaning it up, boom, boom, boom. And then anything goes inside. Here you go.
We probably have about 20 of those in the shop. They come really in handy because they're easy to hold a vessel while sanding away. Exactly. Also, if somebody makes a mistake, they get, like, once it's dried, you can completely, I know a lot of people want to go right to the sink and they want to wash it right off. And we found that all it does is go straight into the ceramic. Yeah. So we'll use a blow dryer or place it in front of the fan for a little bit of time. And then we'll just sand it off in large amounts with, and I mean, that works best on smooth surfaces. We know sometimes there's some fun projects where the surfaces are rough, but this is a lot easier than going and going straight to the sink.
Yeah, and like we said too, it's really nice because then you can get that white rim and you can actually go inside a little bit if you want. And then you get that really clean, smooth on the inside also, or on the outside, just like on Amy's. Yeah. So you get that really neat thing. It looks like you know what you're doing, even if you don't know. Professional. Trained professionals, sometimes.
But it makes your customers look like professionals too, and so that's the main thing.
Exactly. I think the only other thing we have left is it's good to know really, or a couple things, is pencil. So pencil disappears in the kiln. I will say we've had far better luck, I think, with this pencil always disappearing if it's a mechanical pencil.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, so it's like those old school mechanical pencils, like this bad boy. We had a lot of luck actually with the really old school, like yellow ones.
Like the ones where you twist them.
It. Yeah. Like those will always disappear. Sometimes when, I think just a different lead type. Yeah. That sometimes when you find if you don't put clear over it, you will get like a kind of dastardly red line.
Yeah, you do have to kind of tell your customers, like, don't kindergarten it or serial killer it. Not a kindergarten serial killer.
Exactly.
Either a 2-year-old or a serial killer. Don't just kind of go aggressively, really light and sketchy and airy, because the pencil does create a bit of a wax resist.
Exactly.
And you don't want that at all.
But it does work to your benefit if you do.
Yes.
Then it's a little barrier for you. But it's good to know that it does fire out. So as long as people keep it light, then lettering is a big one. You can put your little letters on there and all that jazz. That would have been really hard if I was trying to actually spell something out, since it's the other way around. I didn't go for that. But I think that's about it for our basics. I think, Debs, you might have some tape to discuss.
Yeah, I think we'll go right into that. You want to put Debs in the middle,
Yeah.
and we'll kind of adjust. We're gonna go back and forth with you guys, so you can kind of see. We don't have those fancy mounts like Amy Williams does with her videos. We're gonna tilt.
Amy, shout out.
We love Amy. Hi, Amy.
All right. I feel like I need to say hello. Okay, so I am going to go first, and I'm going to demonstrate my beach pattern. That's this guy here. It's very simple. It used to be a lot more complicated, and I stripped it back and made it more basic. And hate to make you all jealous, but this is basically what our beach looks like here in Kiln. So if you don't believe me, you have to come visit and take one of our classes. This technique we find is a really good one for people that kind of see the blank canvas of the bisque and are really terrified. It's a really simple way of getting a very effective piece. And the basic that I'm going to be using today is some tape. Now this is really good because it gives a nice crisp edge, but I will say this technique is a lot easier for a beginner on a flat piece. So if we get someone that's terrified of doing something, we give them the tape and we give them a flat item. But I'm going to show you how you then progress and go on to a slightly rounded object as well. So the first thing that I do, I used to just take a pencil and try and draw myself a guideline, but I would get to the other side and find that it didn't line up, and that wasted a huge amount of my life. So now I find any scrap piece of paper or card or anything, and I line it up with the top of my piece, and I draw lines where I would like my water to go. And then I just work my way around my object. Sorry, I feel like I'm having to contort my wrists a little bit here. Work my way around, and I mark with the pencil where it's going to be, and that will just make it a lot easier with my tape. Like that. All right, so then once you've got all your little dashes, I kind of do them, I don't know if you can see there, I do them every kind of inch. And then it's a lot easier with my tape. And where you're going to place the tape is where the water is. So the tape is going over the water because we're going to do our solid colour easier part first. So just going to go around. I'm using the really skinny tape from Bisque Imports, but depending on the object that you have, you can use a different type. So if you've got like the tray that I showed you, you can actually just use regular 1-inch masking tape, and it's a lot easier. But the thin stuff makes it easier because you can bend it to the shape of the item. If I tried to use regular masking tape on this, it would end up kind of creasing and wouldn't be straight. Okay, so now I have my taped stemless. I'm just going to run my finger around it, make sure there's no air bubbles so that the glaze can go underneath, and then I'm ready for my glaze. So what I use, I mean, you guys can use anything, any colours that you want or you prefer. I use My Blue Heaven for the sky and Light Ginger for the sand. So you're just going to go around and you're going to do 2 to 3 coats of your sky and 2 to 3 coats of your sand. This is also a really great pattern for adapting to what you like. So I did a class once where I taught this pattern, and a couple of the people in the class actually decided to do a sunset instead of the regular daytime scene. And that's really nice because they did a bit of kind of ombre in the sky as well. So it also dries nice and quick, so I can hold my taped area in the middle while I do my sand. Any kind of brush you prefer. I like a nice big one, so I don't have to be too careful because that tape's going to save me. Also, if you do go a little bit over when you peel your tape off, it's really easy to fix with a sanding block, or you can use a blade. Okay, and then you're going to do that 2 to 3 times depending on your preference, and if you wanted to do the blue on the inside, you could do that at the same time as well, and you're going to let that dry. You don't want it to be, well, it can be, but you don't want it to be too dry when you peel it, just because you get loads of powder everywhere. But you can tape take the tape off as soon as you're ready. And it's very satisfying. You get a nice crisp line. And then here's one I made earlier. I don't know if you can see, I think you can see. What's great about this is that you get a little kind of barrier. So if you do the 2 to 3 coats, you get a nice barrier, which almost forces the person to get a straighter edge with the next part. Unfortunately, the tape doesn't stick well enough onto the glazed area for us to tape it again to get the straight edge, but the wall that's created really helps with that. So the next step is the water. Oh, I used my good brush. Oh, never mind. All right, so for this stage, again, you can use any turquoise and any dark blue that you want. I have been doing this pattern for about 7 years now and used to use underglaze a lot more. So I still use underglaze because I find it gives me more of a watery effect. And the first thing that I do, I have here my turquoise and I have my electric blue here and then just some water. Because I'm painting water, I want it to have a slightly watery effect rather than a thick glaze. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my turquoise and I'm going to mix it in with the water. So it's a really watery kind of wash blue. I'm going to get rid of the excess on the edge and I'm going to go around the whole band. Now if you've got too much water on here, it's going to drip, so make sure that you're holding it so that if it does drip, it drips where you want it to go, where the water is going to go anyway, rather than onto your sky and your sand. Going to get all the way around. This step really is not entirely necessary, but I do it because it means the next step I'm not having to make sure that I've covered all the white areas. So this is just kind of making sure that there's no obvious white bits. And it's all just blue. I will also say at this point that it's worth testing out the tapes that you have in your store before suggesting this technique, because sometimes they can leave a slightly gluey residue on your piece and the glaze will resist it. We've also found that if we tape things in advance, although we thought we were being organised, resulted in the same thing. So you don't want that tape to be on there for too long. Okay, I've got a slightly residue, but you can see there I've got my just wishy-washy blue. Okay, now's the fun part. Now is the nice kind of ombre effect that we're going for. And I'm going to make the brush do all the work. So I like these nice square brushes. I have a few different sizes depending on the size of item. So I do giant wine coolers where the water band is about 4 inches and I use a giant brush, same technique. And what you're going to do is dip your brush into the turquoise and then you're going to hold it up and down straight and you're just going to drag it along the dark blue. So if you can see there, I've just got the dark blue along the top of my brush. And all I'm going to do is, I haven't figured out, there we go, I'll try and so you can see, is I'm going to push my brush down and drag it across. And that's going to do the blend for me. You can see that. And keep going. You do find with this technique that sometimes you end up with a line where you've stopped and started, but I find if I go round the piece twice maybe, that tends to disappear and you still end up with the watery effect that you want. And it's completely up to you how much of the dark blue. As I said, this is how our water looks in Cayman, so that's why I do it this way. But you can adapt it to wherever you live, or if people just want a generic beach scene because they've not been able to take a vacation, they can do it however they want. So you're just going to go around that. Okay, if you can see that. So that is basically it, and it's really good. And I do find that beginners and terrified people do very well with it. I'm just going to show you a few things. It's interesting teaching the class because everyone does it slightly different, but it always looks good. And people that are a bit more artistic like to add to it. So as I said, when I originally did this pattern, it was a lot more intense. And I've done one to show you there. So it's got a palm tree, it's got a starfish. It was very busy. But it's an example of something you can do. And when I had people do a sunset scene, they did the palm tree in silhouette, and it was really quite cool. The other thing, I don't know if you can see, but at the bottom here, there's like a white wave line. That's really good if your client or yourself has not managed to get a crisp edge at the bottom. It's a really good way of disguising that so that no one would ever know, and it looks intentional. But I will say, our water's amazing in Cayman, and we don't really have waves. So,
way to rub it in, Doug. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, and I think that is me done.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. All right.
All right.
All right. Claire is going to
Citrus is next. All right. Cool. Let's get my goo.
We also feel kind of bad for the rest of you listening to Claire and I because we don't have that beautiful British accent.
I know.
That makes everything so lovely and soothing.
And I'm from Cayman, and it's not a fun accent either, so it's not really helping me out very much. All right. So next up, we have got our summery citrus pattern, essentially. Get this all set up for myself. Cool. All right. So this is basically what we've got here. So you can see, beautiful little limoncello serving dish, or like a Cayman lemonade if you were going to go with that route. We did actually as a lemonade pitcher, we did this pattern, which was slightly frightening because it's a small stencil. And then when you make a bigger circle, as you'll find out, on a bigger vessel, it doesn't really make it a lot easier. So I would say for for teaching this class, actually smaller items is not a bad thing. But there's some pretty easy steps to follow. It's basically 4 steps. 4 steps will get you pretty much to this end result. And to start, before we get into the steps, you need to pick your colors. So what I did was I went with kind of a retro citrus theme. And if you're going more kind of pinks and pink lemonade and that's a really nice little theme you can do too, like with the pitchers, which was a Bisque Imports. The Naples pitcher actually was the one that we did the class with. But this one I went retro. So it is limoncello, which I think is bellissimo, limalicious, which often gets confused in classes, so that's always a fun one. And then sunny Tuscany or cantaloupe. I actually did it again, and in my demo, I'm going to be doing it with cantaloupe. It's a little bit of a brighter orange, I think. So first, you pick your glazes. And in this point, too, you can kind of decide if you want like a white inside. And in the glazed versions that I have here, I did a white inside, so it's just a Snow Queen Bellissimo, I believe. Is it Bellissimo? Snow Queen, yeah. So that's on the inside here. Or as I'm doing it today, you can kind of funky it up a little bit. If you wanted to go more colors, you can. This one I went with a cantaloupe, for example. So first, pick your colors. You don't actually need a palette of color because this is all going to be squeezy bottle if you would prefer. Or you can just do the squeeze in technique like we said to do the inside and then just squeezy bottles. But if you're with people who aren't comfortable with squeezy bottles, have arthritis issues or anything like that, then you can always do a paintbrush instead. You don't get just as a full solid color, technically. So once you've picked your colors, then you need to cut your stencil. This part is fun. You're going to have a little piece that looks like this. I think they'll be available to download. And then these are your 2 stencils, actually. So if you print this guy, you'll have a 2-inch stencil, which is him, and then a 3-inch, which is here. And the only instruction you really need is to cut it out with an X-Acto blade. If you're much like myself, I have a graphic design background, I find a lot of joy in that. I don't know if most people do, but I really do. And it's very much, you just want to cut out anything that's black. So the black rim on the outside here, you want to get rid of that. And then your segments, you want to cut that out also. If you want to have a thicker rind, for example, you can leave the black and the white. So it's very much up to you. I don't. So this is just printed on a little brown paper. And you can see that mine is about the same size as the kind of segment, what's like the piece between the segment and the rind. So that's what my size is today. So you have your colors, you have your stencil. Much like modern television and modern cooking shows, I have a stencil right here for you. So we can lead into the actual glazing process. And I said that's about four steps. So step 1, in your glazing process for citrus, you're going to want to do your inside, which I kind of talked about earlier. So this was done with the like kind of pour in technique, kind of sand off the top, and you get this guy. I'm going with, like I said, orange inside, so it's going to be cantaloupe. And once that's done, you can let that dry. I will say this is also a good technique because you have to work in quarters, which I'll get to, If you're doing 2, it's almost easier. So while you're working on one, then you can let the other one dry. That's something to consider too. But I have my inside done, so step 1 is done. Put your background color in, you swirl it around with a paintbrush, you let it dry. That's dry, sand your top, and you're good to do your next step. Your next step is going to be drawing your stencil. Yeah. So drawing your stencil is going to be, move these guys out of the way, pretty simple. And I think we had a comment earlier with someone saying there's a little bit of wax in mechanical pencils, and we actually like that for certain patterns. We haven't had an issue where we've had the clear have any kind of issues with covering the wax. So this is a pattern that's perfect where you want that stencil and you want to be able to have the wax create that barrier. So pretty simple, you'll see. This is what's going to look like on here. You can do a little bit of positioning now, but you don't have to go crazy. The time you really just have to worry about your citrus positioning, it's kind of when you get to the end and you need to sort of fill space. But as you will see, if you look at this guy here, if you didn't fill space, for example, that's a really good example of like, right there, I didn't quite make my lines lined up. So I just filled that in with the color. And then, hey, problem solved, right? So pretty basic. You're going to want to take your stencil and you're going to want to draw that on. You will note that because it's a circle, you got to be a little bit tricky with it. Very much like so, kind of getting around. Doesn't have to be a perfect circle. I would do the outside first for drawing your stencil, and then kind of do your segments after the fact. Boom, boom, boom. I will not be drawing every segment on, because that might put you guys to sleep. But here we go. Drawing segments. Boom. Got one left, and then, as you can see, there we go. Now, this is a good one where you can tell, like, oh, you kind of forgot a little bit on the top. No problem. Go back in and draw it in. If you remember earlier, we said to keep it light, so nothing on this is so incredibly, like, harsh. It's going to show up at the end. So, this is an example of what it looks like with, like, the two citrus on there. In the miracle of modern technology and television, here we go. We have got one that I've already drawn on. So this is what it's going to look like when you kind of have your like bevy of citrus fruits sitting on here. Cool. So you're going to do this for the whole cup. You can go all the way up, or you can make it so you have sort of a border color on the top. In my example, I did it so there is a border color on the top, but you don't have to go that route. Once you have drawn your stencil on, it's going to look like this, then you need to map your colors. So I will say this is something that should be really easy, but is really easy to kind of mentally complicate. So when you pick out in your mind what colors you're going to be doing, for example, this one I said yellow, orange, and green. Cool? So I've got that, and you can see on my example where I've done like the yellows, and I put like the Y's and the O's and the G's. That's all well and good until you throw things like 2 pinks in there. And then you make the mistake of putting like P twice. And that's exactly what I've done before. And then you think, wait a second, I started out with 5. Why do I only have like 3 colors? So I will say, don't overcomplicate it for yourself, which sounds really silly, but already it's one of those things that this is hard enough. You don't need to overcomplicate it with like crazy colors. And like I said earlier, if you're doing sort of a kind of pink lemonade theme, then you might have a coral in there, which is good because not a lot of colors are C. So going back to what I have here, you're going to kind of want to vary it. So you'll see in this guy here, it's like, can you see okay? Yeah. So you'll see like I've got an orange and then a green, and then you kind of try to make it so you don't get 2 colors next to each other. Unfortunately, life isn't perfect. So if you're doing 3 colors, a lot of the times you will end up with 2 colors next to each other, like a yellow and a yellow. No stress, don't worry about it. Because if you start going around and you think, actually, I like prefer a orange to a yellow, then just put that one in there more. Cool? All right, so you have drawn your stencils on. You have mapped out your color. You are feeling very prepared now to go into battle because you will be using the squeezy bottles to fill in. Cool? Perfect. So This is when, in talking about mechanical pencils, that little amount of wax actually super, super helpful because we want that barrier. And it's actually amazing to see when you use that squeezy bottle, how it will stay in the space it needs to. I'm being a little bit bold right now, and I have the bigger nozzles that I'm using, but I did it last night in front of the TV, watching a show, didn't really have any problems. So this is my section marked O, got my orange bottle right here, and then you can tell as I'm pushing it in, you're gonna wanna squeeze a little bit, move it around. You can see that it's not hopping out of the barrier. Like it's staying in there pretty well. And that's to say, even with the fact that we've got like little kind of tips on all these segments, and still you can see I sort of moved it around a little bit and it's still there. So here I am doing another segment for you. I can't see, this is all kind of reversed, so I hope I'm doing the right thing. Yeah, all right. So then that's going to be 2 segments done on this piece there. When I said earlier, you're going to want to work in quarters. This is a good time where you can see, I'm holding it upside down, but you can tell that you're going to want to work in kind of this quarter first, which is going to be sort of like 2 to 4 citrus pieces. And then you can put that down and let it dry. And then you can work on like your other one at the same time. Because by the time one is dry, then the other one will be ready to work on again. So that's good for that. Your final step is going to be kind of doing your background color. So you're going to be doing this and filling in all those segments as you go all the way around. Cool. So you've got like I said, it's good. It's handy to have the 2 going at the same time because then you can kind of do your segments and segments and segments. When you get them all around, then you're good. There's one mistake that's really, really easy to do in this pattern. And I say this because you might make the mistake or someone in your class does. And when we taught the class, inevitably, somebody will do it. It's human nature to want to fill in the rind and not the segment. It's like what you're taught as a little kid to be like, fill in the lines, get it perfect. That's what you want to naturally do. And the problem is that it's actually the lack of color that is the rind that's sort of making the graphic pattern. But when I started doing this pattern, I constantly would do it the wrong way around. And I would start doing the rind, the little lines, instead of the segments. So it's a good little cheerleading tip. Remind yourself where to start when you start getting started with this one. You also feel really bad though, because sometimes people get really good at doing the whole rind and they'll do most of it. You just think, all right, I'm just gonna let them go with it and hopefully it works. So, miracle of modern TV, we're gonna say. Here we go. This is what it's gonna look like when you have it done. So you can see that I tried to have colors that weren't too close together, and then to finish it off, you just fill in the top with your solid background color, for example. And that's just gonna basically be, I chose a green. That's gonna be taking a squeezy bottle, swirling it around, and then once again, using that barrier just to do a light fill. Here you go. You might have a little bit of a ridge where it's dry if you're doing the old school and slow like me. Use your little finger to push it out. There you go. Cool. I think that's it. I think we have been citrus today. Efficiently.
Finished piece. I'll show them the finished piece.
Yeah. So this is an example too of on this sky, on your stencil, there are 2 sizes. And this is a really good way of looking at it and knowing, that's with the smaller 2-inch stencil, and that's with the 3-inch guy. So that's a good use of doing both sizes. But there you go. So that's a finished dude. Another finished one. And then that's a kind of a variation on different colors also. Super retro, super fun. Now let's let in Amy come in, because she's about to bring it kind of like 90s retro.
Thanks so much for sticking with us. I see we've lost some people, but we're trying to finish this up because I know it's happy hour. So if you're taking a beverage, if you have a beverage, let's all cheers to happy hour. This is just water, but cheers to Wednesday. It's hump day. So thank you for sticking with us. I really love those patterns that the girls have been doing. Super easy to teach, really fun. And the pattern I'm going to show you now is kind of, yeah, Claire's right. It's like a 90s retro. We were looking at Amy All's projections for trends and what's trendy. And we thought, well, we've got these citrus pattern that looks really retro. Let's kind of go with that color blocking and retro. And I know in her video she did last week, she had kind of, or 2 weeks ago, had mentioned like Saved by the Bell, and that's exactly what Claire said when I came up with this pattern. Is it's kind of like a deconstructed watermelon with a Saved by the Bell twist to it. And what's really great about this is that although these colors look like watermelon, you could change it up a bit. So there's the pattern on a coaster, and we use the 3.5 tiles a lot as samples in the studio because we can use a command strip on the back and stick them on the wall, and then people can take them off and put them at their table, which is really handy because they can look at the pattern up and close. But if you take this pattern and you change up the colors, it's still super retro. So I just use yellow and orange and blue with white dots versus the colors of a watermelon. So you can make the watermelon pattern, or you can make more of a 90s, 80s, like late 80s retro pattern. So that's really fun and handy to do. I'm gonna go through this on the stemless, which I have here. So again, solid color. This is Cutie Pie Coral I'm using on the inside. Obsessed with that color. I use it on pretty much everything. And it's a really fun, because you guys know how hard it is to get bright pinks, right? Like, it's so tough. People come in and they're like, I want a neon pink. And it is so hard to fire a neon pink. And so we use Cutie Pie Coral. We find that it is the brightest pink that we have, and it's super beachy. I also like Melancholy. I think that has a bit of an orange tint to it. So whatever you're feeling, but again, solid color on the inside. And then I just kind of start. So we're using stemless mugs, and I've also done like the green, so you can kind of choose whichever watermelon color you want on the inside. And then I did the solid green on there. So let me tip this down so you can kind of see what we're working with here. Yeah, is that good? There we go. Okay, so I've got my palette here with my colors. And I'm going to be using a round brush for this to start off with those really ovally. So you can see here I've got this color is Sour Apple, but you could also use Limelicious. Some people don't like how thin Bellissimo glazes are, but I really like them for more translucent. So I'm using the Sour Apple on this, and I just kind of go 2 coats round and around, and I get a nice watermelon type shape. So I've got like the whole watermelon in mind as I am doing this ovally shape. It's really hard to do when I'm not up close. You girls were rocking it with that squeezy bottle. And so I just kind of go over it. You want a more transparent feel to it. You don't want to like do 1 solid coat and then do 2 or 3 after that. I just like to have more of a transparent vibe to it. And so with these watermelon, I'm kind of just placing those big shapes in various random bits. So sometimes they're a little more round, sometimes they're a little more oval. I know watermelons are all different shapes. I remember visiting the States last summer, and at Walmart they had small watermelons and they were calling them personal size watermelons. Crazy to me. Like, you can have your own. I guess then if you tell people you ate a whole watermelon, they would be really impressed. But so they're all different types of sizes. And what's really cool is it's the color blocking, which is super on trend as well. So you've kind of added a bunch of color blocking. And so there's a dried version of it, and I've just got my basic big shapes there. So it kind of looks like large ovals, and this is dried. So after I did these, I let it dry, and I'm ready now to add those circles. And it's really crazy because I was watching Amy All's video, and she's doing a lot of the techniques that we decided to do on here as well. So it means we're kind of on point there. I've got my squeezy bottle. One of the fun things is to make sure that the glaze really gets down to the tip, kind of shake it out. I know that when we give these to our clients or our customers, sometimes they don't, and then it kind of like, I hate to say it, like farts all over it. It kind of like sprays the glaze everywhere. So I make sure that glaze gets down there, squeeze out a little, and then I like to circle it, but I like to go off beat. So instead of completely following that whole circle exactly, I like to kind of go off a little bit. And that's where that retro pattern, you see it in like wallpapers and t-shirts and Hawaiian shirts from like the 90s. And the reason I think Claire said Saved by the Bell is kind of like the pattern of the wallpaper at the Max is what I felt like it was. But you're kind of just deciding, and there's no rhyme or reason, y'all. You don't have to like go perfectly. It doesn't have to match up perfectly. You can totally go with it. You can go against it. It doesn't really matter. So you've got these really fun shapes and kind of wonky outlines. You can also make these thicker. You know, sometimes the watermelon rinds are really thick. So it's up to you if you want to do thick or thin on that. So after using the squeezy bottle on that one and it dries, it's going to look like this. I love the magic of television. It's like a cooking show, you're right. It's like, boom, here we go. So now you can see the big color blocking along with the outlines that don't completely match up on that. And then, oh, you're probably asking the color. So again, this is Sour Apple, and then this was Just Froggy. I really love Just Froggy. I find it to be a nice leaf color. You can also use In the Jungle, which is Bellissimo. Again, it's up to you how thick or thin you like it to come out of the squeezy bottle. Okay, and then the last thing is to add those watermelon shapes. Now, I like to use a pencil, and I like to draw. I like to plan out my triangles, and this is mostly for like shape and deciding, you know, where is an empty shape? Where should the watermelon come? I've got a bit of white space here, so I'm gonna place another triangle there. And I really like to plan them out. So as I'm glazing, I'm not trying to guess. Also with pencil, you can kind of make a triangle and it's not perfect and you can erase it or you don't have to erase it because it burns off like Claire had mentioned before. You can also make those triangles as big or small as you like to fit your space. But I like to put the tip of the point of the watermelon into it to make it feel really cohesive. So I'm just gonna finish drawing out a few more and then I get a good feel for the spacing. I'm gonna go back to using that Cutie Pie Coral again in a squeezy bottle. And I have to say, I would say that 85 to 90% of what we do in our patterns in our shop are done with squeezy bottles. I just love the preciseness of it. I get really shaky with a brush and I feel like I can control the nozzle or the tip. I also like when you're working on raw ceramic like this doesn't have a background color, you can push into it. I know that when you get to a part that is like glazed, you don't want to dig too much because you don't want the glaze to come off in the nozzle. And that's when we're constantly unclogging nozzles, is when we get like the background color into the nozzle. So I always have a straight pin in order to help that out. So that's the great thing about the nozzles as well, as with a brush, you have to do the lines perfectly. So if you're using a squeezy bottle once, it kind of saves you the time. Now you do have to be careful that you're not putting too much because as you're working with a circular vessel, it could run, which is where some of the thicker glazes come into play because they're not going to be running down your vessel. But I also find that if you're moving fast enough and you're turning it over and over again, then you're not going to get the drips because it's constantly like upside down. I think the number one thing that we remind our clients about is don't take the vessel that is like vertical and turn it like this and let it dry because things will drip. Try to keep it like this. And you do have to be a little patient. So in my normal life, I would go ahead and set this in front of a fan or hit it with a blow dryer just to stop it. I know if you hit it with a blow dryer too fast, you can get cracking. But if you kind of just let it dry naturally and then work on a second piece, I like to work on 2 pieces at once, then it can go. And then all you have to do after that is to add in your watermelon seeds. And I'm not going to do that right now because this is drying and it's wet. But you can see here, I just added 3 black seeds to it, which is really cool to make it look like it. And so some of the things that I like to do with the black seeds, and I'm going to try to do this up close, is that I like to make a circle and then I pull it up. And so then it gives me like a seed type shape. So again, if you do a circle and then you pull, you kind of get that seed-like shape. Like that. Kind of gives you that watermelon. I mean, it could be dots. You could do dots and 3s like that, or you could do a little circle and pull it up for that seed shape. So yeah, oh, somebody's talking about the dish. Let me bring that dish back. This is, I believe, the geometric dish. This is from Bisque Imports. And you can, I covered the back and the sides with cutie pie coral, and then I did the pattern on the top, which is great. We also have my new favorite dish I'm totally obsessed with is the extra small handled tray. It's so cute. They have the small handled tray, medium handled tray, large. I think there's an extra large maybe, I'm not quite sure. But the extra small is our new obsession because it's just so cute. You can just put a pattern all over it and completely cover it all. So yeah, that's my kind of retro, what did you call it? Disassembled watermelon or whatever they call that, 90s pattern. And so that's really fun to put on the stemless, and 2 stemless on a tray, super cute. It's really easy to upsell your customers because while they're working on one piece, they could be doing them simultaneously. And I think that that's a really great sell because I don't know if some of the studios charge by the hour, but it keeps them in the studio longer, or it brings them back because now they want a matching set. So my suggestion is when you're trying to sell a set, put it in your studio together. Like, we'll put these together because people are like, oh, I have this by myself. I didn't know I couldn't live without this. So it's really nice. I think Claire's pattern was great because she had the small tray and she can fit 2 stemless on that tray and sell that. And that's like a nice hostess gift. You can make something for a friend. The picture that she mentioned, the Naples picture with 2 stemless are really great. And so I think that that's a great selling point. So yeah, I hope that we've kind of inspired your summer. You girls want to come back? Your summer patterns. Again, sunny summer, totally. I know it's summer all the time where we live, so it's kind of fun for us to create patterns in that manner. And we hope that you learned a little bit, something you can bring to your studio. We would love to see you try out some of our patterns. Be sure to tag us at 3 Girls in a Kiln, the number 3. We're on social media. You can find us on Instagram, on our website, 3girlsinakiln.com, and kind of see all the fun stuff. We love to live on our stories, all of the new things, and really creating patterns. And I think even a pattern creating class would be really fun.
Oh yeah.
I'm very grateful because that does not come naturally to me. Claire has a graphic design background, and so I think I've learned a little bit, and Debs is an illustrator, so it's kind of like I've learned a little bit about pattern making, and it's trial by error. There are some really ugly patterns I have created in the past that are living somewhere else. So yeah, I think
we're trying it on little kids first in our summer camp and seeing how that goes.
Yes, our summer camp with our kids that have signed up, we're going to be trying that out with them. But if you have any other questions about those, you can feel free to email us 3girlsinakiln@gmail.com. If you are looking to escape, our borders are opening up hopefully in the fall, and you can come to our beach and see us, which we would love.
I saw someone mention, maybe Ceramajam.
Oh, Ceramajam 2021 in the Cayman Islands. I don't know. We can help out with that. That would be awesome. Again, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to Bisque Imports for allowing us this platform to reach you all and share with you some of the fun things we're doing at our studio. Other than that, grab a cold beverage, whether it's lemonade or a cocktail in your Stemless, and we'll check you guys later. Bye.
See ya.